Hi guys, today we're going to be talking about the business cycle. So, taking everything and kind of putting it together. We've been looking at ways we measure the economy, how our GDP, is it growing or is it shrinking? We're looking at unemployment. Do people have jobs? Do they not have jobs? We're looking at inflation. Is that going up or down? And all of that relates to what we call the business cycle. Is the economy getting better or is the economy getting worse? And again, this is going to have huge relevance to what's going on in the economy right now. That we have seen our economy decline, like in the 2008 recession. We've seen it grown since then, and we're going to see it decline now. So you can see just from looking at this beginning image here, sometimes our economy increases and sometimes our economy decreases. And it has been that way throughout history. We see growth and we see decline consistently, and it's something we can depend on. Economies go up and economies go down. So, we're going to talk about the different stages of the business cycle, and then we'll look at the relevancy of that business cycle model to what's going on today. So, to start with, the business cycle, the definition is that it allows people to understand the direction of the economy, whether it is growing or shrinking, and allow us to plan accordingly. So, we're going to look at those indicators, things like GDP, inflation, unemployment, to give us an idea of how well our overall economy is doing. And really, the economy follows this business cycle pretty regularly. So, we might think, well, our economy is going down. That might be concerning. Yes, it absolutely is. But what we know is that eventually it will go back up. And someday then it will go back down again. And someday it will also go back up. So the phases of the business cycle, we have 5 of them. 4 of them are ones that we're really going to focus on. We call them expansion, which is when the economy is growing. A peak when we've reached the top of that growth, a contraction or a recession when the economy is then going to shrink, a trough where we bottom out and we can't get any lower, and then a recovery where we'll start growing again and then move into an expansionary phase again. So we, again, kind of looking at that here, you can see how it goes up and down on this graph. You have an expansion, then you reach the peak, then you decline through a recession, you reach the trough, and then you go into a recovery phase, and then you expand and peak and recession all over again. I'm not going to show you this video. I'm going to include this in the resources on your checklist. So if you have any questions or you want to see this in a little bit more detail, you're going to start at 9 minutes and 54 seconds, or you can watch the whole thing because this is going to talk about all the things we've discussed, like unemployment and inflation. But I'll include it in your resources for this week rather than show it to you here, but it'll go into some more detail about how our economy goes up and down and how it moves through the business cycle. This shows you again that this is pretty consistent throughout history, that we grow and we decline. So if you go all the way back to the Civil War, you can see the economy peaking during the Civil War, and then immediately after the Civil War, you'll see a big decline. If we go into World War I, you will see the economy peaking and then declining. And then if you look, the Great Depression there in the 1930s is our greatest decline. And then after the Great Depression, you'll see this big growth during World War II, and then we immediately decline after that. And it just keeps going up and down and up and down and up and down. So during periods of expansion, what we see are an increase in wages. So when the economy is doing well, what happens during growth? And this is what we have been seeing, particularly in the last 8 years. During the last 8 years, a good chunk of your life so far has been periods of expansion. During those times, we see wages going up. People are making more money. We see really low rates of unemployment. I said in a couple lessons ago, in Minnesota, for example, unemployment was below 3% or right around 3%. That is a really, really great unemployment rate. During periods of expansion, that means people are optimistic, they're spending their money, they're demanding goods, they're buying lots of stuff, and when they're buying lots of stuff, there's lots of jobs available. New businesses are going to start. If you want to go get a bank loan, whether it's to buy a new house or start a new business, it's relatively easy to get that loan. And businesses are making profits and stock prices are going up. Okay, so things are good. Like, this is a period of growth. It means the economy is doing well. It means GDP is high. We're producing a lot of goods and services. We're making a lot of stuff. That's what GDP is telling us. And unemployment rates are low. Okay, this also probably means that inflation is happening, but usually, it's something we want to keep an eye on. But inflation means that there's growth. Higher rates of inflation mean people are spending their money. And when people spend their money, that means they create jobs, businesses are doing well, and they're making profits. Okay, that is our period of expansion when we go up. Eventually, this tops out. So, at the peak, the economy is going to stop growing. It means things are still good. Unemployment rates are going to be the lowest they've ever been. GDP, however, is going to reach its maximum. We are going to get to a point where the economy just can't produce anymore, that there are limited resources. There are only a certain number of people in this country, and we just can't produce more, and we just can't hire more people. And so we top out, we get to the top. Once we're at that top, and we can't grow anymore, it's going to move into a contraction. We're going to start to see a decline because as we get to that top, people then, we're going to have to stop, kind of steady our production. We can't keep that. Resources are going to start to run out. We're not going to be able to produce anymore. We might then have to start laying off some workers. And as we do that, the economy then shifts in a downward cycle. So when we go into that downward contraction or in a period of recession, businesses are going to start to cut back their production and they're going to lay off people. So they can't produce anymore. Maybe people start buying less. I mean, that's certainly what we're seeing right now is people are not buying as much as they normally do. As they start to stop buying stuff, then you don't need as many workers. Unemployment's going to increase. The number of jobs available will decline, and people will get more pessimistic. They'll think, okay, the economy's not doing well. Maybe I shouldn't go out there and buy more stuff. Maybe I need to hold back on things that I'm buying. And as they stop spending money, that contributes to the problem as well, because as we cut back our spending, then less jobs are needed because we're not making as much stuff. Our GDP will go down. The number of goods and services we're producing will decrease as people stop spending their money. Banks will also stop lending money. It will become more difficult for companies to take out a loan to start a new business or to take out a loan to buy a new house or buy a new car. That will be harder to do as our money supply starts to decrease. Once we're contracting, then we will get to the bottom, which we call the trough. So you can see on that graph, the bottom, the very bottom point where we can't get any lower is called the trough. This is when our economy bottoms out. It reaches the lowest point. So when you are in the trough, you have really high rates of unemployment. That means that a lot of people do not have jobs. They are looking for jobs, but they are not available. There is also a really low amount of spending because during a recession, prices will also often decrease. And so people think, like, why buy it today when it's going to get cheaper tomorrow? And so they'll cut back on their spending, and spending at the trough is really low. Stock prices are also really low because companies are not doing well, and so they're not making profits, which means people are not investing in their company. And so the idea, though, if you look at the graph, is that once you've reached the trough, there's nowhere to go but up. So you expect then to go into a recovery phase. Now, the only reason why we would not immediately go up is if we are in a recession or a depression. So a recession of the economy is when the economy contracts for over 6 months, and if it lasts for more than a year, we are in an economic depression. Now, my husband was just reading an article the other day that says it looks like we're moving into a recession. And he said, well, aren't we in a recession right now? And the answer to that is no, because it hasn't been longer than 6 months. So we measure the economy in 4 quarters. Every 3 months, we measure how well the economy is doing. In order for this to see what's happening right now, this decline in our economy, in order for it to be considered a recession, it has to last for 6 months, and that has not happened yet. If our decline lasts a year or longer, then economically we call it a depression. If we look back to the 2008, what we call the 2008 recession, really that was a depression because it lasted longer than a year. So it's kind of misnamed, and it's misnamed on purpose because depression is a really depressing word. And we don't want people to think that we're in a depression. We want them to think that we're going to come out of it and it's not as bad as a depression because our thoughts matter. And I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. So if it lasts 6 months or a year, we're in a recession or a depression. That would be the bottoming out in the trough. And then eventually we move into a recovery phase. So individuals and organizations start to develop more positive attitudes towards economic factors like investment and employment. So people start to say, okay, we've been kind of in the bottom. Now I think like now's the time to start buying things. Prices might be really low, so you're like, all right, like prices are low. I'm going to start buying stuff up. Maybe house prices are low, gas prices are low, and you're like, okay, I'm going to start purchasing these things now that the prices are low. As you start buying more things, then companies are going to need to start hiring more workers. Usually it's slow. They start to slowly hire back workers. But as they buy more stuff, more workers are hired, then those workers have more money in their pocket, and so they're going to go and buy more stuff, and that means more workers are needed. And so you can see that it's a domino effect. Either the dominoes go in a positive direction, one builds on the other, or the dominoes go in a negative effect, and it builds on each other in a downward spiral. So there are 4 variables that kind of keep this cycle up and down, up and down, up and down. That's pretty consistent. The first is business investment. When the economy is expanding, sales and profits keep rising, so companies invest in new plants and new equipment, they create new jobs, and then that leads to more expansion beyond that. So businesses are super important. If businesses are doing well, they're going to hire more workers. More workers have more money, they spend more money, and we'll see a growth in the economy. If businesses have to shut down, which is something we're seeing right now, then they have to lay off workers, then there's less spending in the economy, and the economy will decline. So how much businesses are investing and how many people businesses are hiring is really important in the business cycle. The second has to do with interest rates and credit, which has to do with, interest rates are when you take out loans. You want to take out a loan when the interest rate is low. That is the fee that you are paying to the bank in order to take out that loan. So when we have low interest rates, people are more likely to take out loans. Taking out loans is good for the economy. It means you're going to start up a new business or you're going to go purchase something, and that helps the economy grow. If interest rates go up, then people are taking out less loans, which means less businesses and less buying. Okay, so what we're seeing right now is that interest rates are going to go down. They're going to drop interest rates to try to encourage people to take out more loans, because we want people to take out a loan and then go use that loan and spend it in the economy. The third thing that keeps the business cycle going is expectations. Our idea, our thoughts and feelings about how the economy is doing can actually affect how the economy is doing. And I wanted to show you this kind of interesting thing Google has done, looking at trends. So how many times are people using the word recession, for example? So this shows your interest over time in a recession. And you can see here, nobody was talking about a recession all through 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. Nobody is really saying the word recession. And actually, more recently, or kind of a little bit in August of 2019, there were talks. Are we moving into a recession? Do we need to be concerned about a recession? And then they're like, no, we're good. And nobody's really concerned about it all the way until we get to March. Okay, and in March, we see this big peak of the number of people talking about a recession. But interestingly, now it's gone down. Less people are mentioning that. But if I talk about, you can kind of look at other things people have been talking about: coronavirus recession, U.S. recession 2020. If I click on that one, again, you're going to see the same pattern. Now, does that mean we're in a recession? No, but what it means is people are talking about it. And as they talk about it, that can contribute to a decline. If I'm worried we're going into a recession, I'm going to stop spending my money. And when I stop spending my money, I'm going to hurt businesses because I'm not spending anymore. And as I stop spending, then those businesses have to lay off workers, and it's going to contribute to unemployment and decreases in GDP. So if I'm positive, if I have a positive attitude about the economy and I think things are going well, I'm going to go spend my money. And as I spend my money, that's going to be good for the economy. So our thoughts and fears can have an impact on if the economy is going to go up or the economy is going to go down. And then lastly, an external shock. And this is really what we're experiencing right now, is this external shock, which is some kind of outside disruption that is going to influence the output of the economy. So right now we see the disruption of the coronavirus. It is a disruption which has forced businesses to close down. not because they can't produce or that they don't want to hire people or that the rest of us don't want to spend our money, but there's some kind of external thing that's happening that's shutting down the economy. We can see this sometimes with natural disasters. If there's been a hurricane, that will shut down the economy and cause the economy to decline. Another example in history is in 2001. So in 1992 to 2000, there was this long period of expansion, and then the 9/11 attacks happened. And after 9/11, people were afraid and people were fearful of what was going to happen to the economy, and it was something out of our control that eventually caused the economy to decline and go into a contraction as a result. So these external shocks can, if we go into war or we have some kind of virus like the coronavirus, can cause the economy to move into a contraction or a recessionary phase. Now, again, history tells us we'll come out of it. Okay, so it's not. It's something we need to be concerned about, that we're moving into a recession, or probably moving into a recession, or at least we're contracting. But we know that eventually it will go back up again. Okay, we don't know how long that will take, but we know history tells us we will go back up. Okay, so tomorrow's assignment, you're going to be taking a look at how the economy is doing right now. Again, we have signals that we are declining and that an external shock is the reason for that. But I'm going to give you in the next lesson some podcasts that will explain what's happening with the economy and what are some indicators about both optimism and pessimism. What are some, things that we're looking forward to or that we can anticipate that are good, and what are some things that we're concerned about right now. Again, I was kind of looking at the news. The world hasn't seen a recession this bad since the 1930s. Again, I would argue we're not quite in a recession yet because it hasn't been 6 months, but we are looking at how this is affecting both the U.S. economy and the economy as a whole. And again, a lot of this has to do with fear. People are afraid of what could happen to the economy, and as people are afraid, they're going to change their spending habits, they're going to change their investment, they're going to change the likelihood of starting new businesses, and that can then impact the economy even more. This one is also talking about gross domestic products, so we're seeing a significant decrease in the number of goods and services we're making, which again will contribute to that contraction in the economy. Lastly now then, why should we care about this? What effect does this have on us? I think, at least right now we can kind of see some of this impact of the business cycle. One of them is if you know the economy is in a contraction, like we're looking at right now, this is maybe not a good time to quit your job because jobs are going to become more scarce and it might be really difficult for you to find another job. And some of you might be experiencing that right now, that you have lost your job as a result of the contraction. You might be finding it difficult to find another job. Or you have a job right now, maybe you don't love it, but you're not going to quit it because you know it's going to be really difficult for you to find another job. However, if we're in the alternate scenario here, which is we're in an expansionary phase, that means jobs are readily available. So if you know the economy is now starting to increase, that might be a good time for you to switch careers. Many of you, as you're looking to go into college, over the next 4 years, I am going to bet that we're going to see an increase in the business cycle. And it might be by the time you get your college degree, the economy might be in a really good position where there's a lot of jobs available because we're experiencing growth. The other reason why I think it's important to know where we're at in the business cycle is to decide whether or not you should make a big purchase. So if you know you're not going to lose your job during a contraction, maybe that's a good time to buy a house because prices are going to be really low. But you want to make sure that you're not going to lose your job, that you have a stable income before you make those big purchases. So for us right now, like for my family, we just bought a house last year, which was a good time for us to buy a house. But now interest rates are really low. It might be a good time for us to refinance our loan because we know that interest rates are going to be coming down. It might be time for us to look at what interest rate are we paying and can we take out a new loan at a lower interest rate, because both of us right now we're lucky enough to still have our jobs. Okay, so knowing where the business cycle is and what's happening as a result of that can have an impact on your daily life, whether it's your employment or whether it's loans or your spending or purchasing has an effect. Okay, so like I said, I have an assignment for tomorrow for you that actually on this These notes, you have a page 2. You're just going to identify, there's 4 statements, looking at where along that graph you think those statements are most likely, or where they are, which stage of the graph it's describing. And then you have to go through and just answer those other couple of questions. And then tomorrow you're going to be listening to some podcasts that talk about the economy, the state of the economy right now. Okay, as always, let me know if you have any questions or if you need help with anything, and I will help you in any way that I can. Hope you're having a good day.